Welcome and thanks for attending Family History Research, Beginner, How to Start. Before we begin, I want to pass on some advice once given to me. Everyone was a beginner once. Even experienced researchers are learning as new records are released for the first time we use a record. Oral history can change a little over time, but it does contain nuggets of truth. Be flexible in the spelling of names and the ages of family. Ages can fluctuate plus or minus 5 years, maybe give another year. But because remember, people didn't always know exactly when they were born, so they're kind of estimating, but they're usually close. Look at the fan club on records, which are friends, associates, and neighbors. Friends marry friends. Neighbors are witnesses to wills. In the early 1800s, we didn't have the cars, so neighbors married neighbors. And there could be multiple marriages within a marriage. Associates who are your coworker could also be the person who knows a lot about your family because they could have been an associate with your family from birth. And so your families are intertwined, but they never actually married into the family, but they still know a lot about your family. So take a notice of those names that are signing wills that are keep popping up everywhere, because you're going to want to try to track down those family members of those descendants too, because you never know who might have a picture or a story about your family in a diary. Write down where information is found so you can always go back and find it again if you need to, or if someone else is doing some research and need to just verify something, they can also find it. So write down if you found it in a courthouse or a library. Like it could just be as much as Polk County Courthouse, box 5, file folder, blah, 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 in Jim Jones's folder. So you just want to make sure you get enough key information that you can get back to that document again. Last, but just as important, everything is not on the internet, and everything on the internet is not true. You'll have to visit a courthouse or a library to truly find your family. And I am Ricki King. I'm your presenter today. I'm a genealogist historian, and I was instrumental in helping getting the laws changed on access to death certificates in Iowa from 75 years to 50 years and opening up fetal death records. And fetal death records is what we call stillbirths. I have a Bachelor of Arts in History from Drake University, and I'm a certificate holder in Boston University's Genealogical Research Program, which has given me the training to be able to help you guys and actually help research clients. And I'm the owner of Roots To Branches Genealogy, LLC. And I've been a genealogist for almost 20 years. And this question is the question I get the most from Blacks or from whites, or Caucasians, what I should say. What about 1870? Well, have you heard Blacks can't research their family because there are no records before 1870? But I'm asking you, have you heard Germans, Irish, Italians, or Jewish immigrants? They can't research their family because the records are all overseas. I'm thinking you have not heard that before, but it's pretty much the same question. If you start in 1870, or if you start overseas, you're not going to be able to research your family because you don't know enough about your family, not because the records aren't there. So what you do is you research generation by generation. And so that when you get to overseas or 1870, you have the knowledge to get you past that hurdle. And we're not going to say everyone's going to be able to get overseas or everyone's going to be able to get past 1870 now. No, you might not be able to. It's not because you can't do it, it's because you don't have the knowledge to do it. And maybe the records aren't available yet. So you might have to wait a while until those records become available to the public. And then eventually you'll get overseas. Another reason you might be able to get overseas or past 1870 is your direct line ancestor doesn't have the records there to get you there. So you want to look at their siblings, because say you had a brother and sister that both immigrated from England, and the brother only ever records he came from England, but the sister actually records the parish that she came from. Well, if you never go to the sister, you're never going to get that information. So look at all the people that immigrated, and that'll help you get that whole full family story and get you overseas or get you past 1870. And for Blacks, have no fear. Not all Blacks were slaves. So just because you think you have an issue of 1870, you might not. Because your family was free in 1860, they're going to be on the records. They're going to be in the census by name. So don't just let the date or getting overseas stop you from doing your research. Worry about that when the time comes, but just first do the research to get you there. It might take you several years just to get to 1870 or just to get overseas, and you were worried for nothing. But in the meantime, you've learned a lot about your family, and that's the point that we want to stress here. We're not trying to get somewhere. We're just trying to learn what we don't already know about our family to pass on to the next generation. And family history research is never complete because there's always new family coming or always new family you're going to find. So let's get started. And when I say that is, where do you start? You start in your own home. You start with vital records. You have your birth certificate. You have your kids' birth certificate. You might have your parents' marriage license, or if they've passed, you have their death certificate. Each one of those records gives you another generation because it tells you who their parents are. So look for those records. Newspapers. You want to use newspapers to help fill out a story. You just don't want to have this person died this date and they were born this date. You want to tell a little bit about their story. So, hey, did they run the Drake relays? Tell the story about them running the Drake relays. It might be as they ran the 4x1. They came in second, but at least it's something, a story to bring that person to light. Look at baby books. And I'm saying the older baby books, my brother was born in 1960. His baby book actually asks who were the parents and grandparents of this baby. So there's a start of a family tree if you didn't know who your grandparents were. Scrapbooks are good. And Waukee Library has the best scrapbook I've ever seen. A lady, I'll have her name correct at the end of the slide because I have it written down, but I believe it was Barnett. And there's 7 to 9 scrapbooks that she did that are at the library, the original scrapbooks, where she cut out newspaper articles from World War II. And she did this for her son, who was in World War II, and he's a POW. So he was a prisoner of war. But she detailed about all the other soldiers from Dallas County that were out there and other local stories. And so if you have a family member that was in World War II from Dallas County, I would even say the state, I would check it out because you never know what story interested her, or if that story about Dallas County soldier also included someone else from across the state. It was a fascinating example of what someone's life story can be, but it's not just her life. She's detailing the life that was going on while her son was a POW. So when he got home, he could see what was happening. Beautiful resource. But I've digressed. I'm sorry. One thing I'm doing this research is that I want to prove to you or show you, I can't really prove it, but show you it's not as hard to do research as you think it is. So what I've done is looked at a random Waukee yearbook, picked someone out, it happens to be a Helen Lux. I just like the name. And I'm going to show you a snippet of a research question and how I researched her. And that's all I had, was a yearbook and a name. And I've already mentioned scrapbook. Photos are good. Look at your old photos, turn them over and see if there's writing on the back. Maybe someone's already told you who someone is or a connection. If you're not already doing it, print out those digital photos because technology changes over time. And what you're saving in digital format may not have access to in 30 years. Think about VHS tapes. When you do start printing those photos, write an archival pencil on the back the names of everyone in the photo. Like in this photo here, it's my family. What I do, I hope you can see the pointer. If not, it's the pictures, you can see there's a group of people. What you do is you write, this is first row, right to left, and you name the people. And the second row, right to left, or left to right, either way. But list them in order so that people will know who they are in the picture. You don't want to just list a long column line of who everyone is in there, because that doesn't help anyone. I know everyone's names, but I don't know who each person is. So you want to do that just to pass on that generation information. And sometimes, like I know this picture is taken at my mother's house in Devonport. It's all right. Mom, and I write parentheses, Penny King, Davenport apartment, because I can't just say mom, because hey, whose mom is it a generation from now? So I use parentheses to identify if I put who my mom is, or I put myself, then I always put my name in parentheses so they know who actually wrote that. That's another a source, so we can say, yes, this is someone who actually was there, who's recording this, not someone in the future trying to remember who these people are. So just little tidbits of information. Try to put down as much as you can. I put down dates. They don't have to be exact. It could be March of 1980, or it could just be as much as 1980. At least you have something there to place people in that time period. And that helps you tell that story as well. Another record you can use is funeral programs, or books, I should say. This is funeral books right here. That's the obituary funeral program, so that's good. But we're going to move on to this actual funeral book, which happens to be my father's. And the reason we're looking at funeral books, so you're probably like, what can a funeral book tell me? Well, it tells you a lot. And you don't realize what funeral books can tell you until you really analyze it. Okay, there we go. I was using a pencil and not the pointer. That's why you guys probably couldn't see my laser pointer. But what I'm saying is the names. Family members, when they go to a funeral, usually arrive in a group. So when they sign the book, it's in a group format. So you have a large group of people with similar names signing at around the same time. They're most likely related. And in my case, my family likes to sign the relationship after the name, like the brother. This is Robin Humphrey, which I'm sure you can't read. But what I do, little side note, what I do is like Robin Humphrey, I write his name in pencil off to the side so future generations can see it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. So I have an example of what I did. But back to people showing up in groups, families showing up together. In this case, you have King, Baker, King. It says a brother, it says King, son. So we'll probably assume that these two Kings are related. Ding, 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 same last name. But think about it. You can't just go because they have the same name and say they're related. Because there's a lot of Jones out there that aren't related. There's a lot of Smiths out there that aren't related, but they happen to be going to someone with the last name King's funeral or last name Smith's funeral. So you can't take that. You got to look at the overall picture. But in this case, what we're trying to find out is this Laura Baker. She snuck in between these Kings. Is she related to this possible family group? Or is she someone who came in after them and signed the book before these guys because they went off talking to someone? So she snuck in real quick. You got to consider that too, even though it's a large family group, there might be an odd name in there. Are they related or not? And it also could be a married daughter's name, and that's why her name isn't the same. So you're looking at these books, look at identifiers as well as the brother, son, where you see Father Mike. Well, right there, it's a pastor. Look and see if you can find out what church he belongs to or a pastor of. In this case, it actually says it off to the side, but if it didn't say it, you would want to look for it. Because is that the church the deceased is married at, or the church that they were baptized at? That gives you a clue to records. Ready to go look for records. So you gotta think outside the box when you're looking at these and what these signatures are telling you. And I also like to say these, especially if they're really old books, like that first one that was in that last picture that had the newspaper clipping to it. That was a 1950s signature. Sometimes you can get them older. If you don't have a picture of someone, their signature is just as good because look, you have that key. That person literally touched that paper and signed their name. So it can be a replacement. It could also be used as a source, as if you have two people with the same name and you don't know which one is which. If you have a signature from your actual relative and you know it's a signature, what do you got? You can identify which of those two people with the same name is most likely your relative because it matches a previous signature you already have. It's another record source that you might not ever think of that you can use. But now let's look at another page from this same funeral book. Oops, there we go. Here we have doctor. It says your doctor. Well, we want to look for those records, don't we? Don't say, oh, we can't get access to them because records are privacy. Well, my dad died in 1987. The records weren't as strict. If your person died in 1950, it's even less strict. So you might be able to get access to those records. They might not even be available, but it's worth a try. Because if nothing else, you'll find a little more detail about your family health history if you can get that. But it might have next of kin listed there that you don't have a record of yet. So get you another generation or someone else to research. And in this case, this arrow here, it says Aldine Davis, it says mom. Hey, we hit the jackpot. We know who his mother is. The deceased's mother told us who she is. Or did she really? It could be a mother-in-law. So just because it says mom, you can't just say that's the mother. You got to do the research. And here's another family grouping. Like we have the Davis Lloyd Beecham. We have this Linda Johnson, the same thing as Miss Baker. Did she sneak in there or is she a family member? And this is where I was saying where I write down the names off to the side because I know what that name says now, but it's 30 years later. Grandkids are coming along. Would they know what that name says? Because they weren't there. They don't know this person. So they are not gonna be able to read that signature. It might be a name lost to time. So write down I don't do it right away, I think I did this 10, 15 years after the fact. When it dawned on me, I needed to add this person's name because I can't read it. And as I was putting this presentation together, I was having a problem reading this name here as my cousin Jeff. So I now have gone back and wrote Jeff there. The Robin Humphrey I showed you earlier, I now see I need to go back and add his name because I could clearly read it, but I'm sure you couldn't read that name was Humphrey. And I'll show you again so you'll look at it. But it's something that you think about. And here, in fact, I'll show you right now, Robin Humphrey. You can see here, I'm sure you probably couldn't read that name was Humphrey. So I've gone back and wrote Robin. And Robin has since died, so what a great keepsake that I have his signature. But in the course of all of this, let me tell you, there's 20 signatures on these 2 pages. And there's only 3 people on here that are not related. And you can see it, the arrows. Father Mike, the doctor, and Linda Johnson. She did sneak into the family while the family was off talking, I'm sure. But Laura Baker is a cousin. And I know that because I actually know Laura Baker. And I would write, as I've done genealogy research and as I see my family doing this, writing their relationship to people on obituary or funeral programs, I now do that myself. I'll write sister, father, sister, daughter, co-worker, friend, any descriptor you can put for someone else who might be doing genealogy research and using a funeral book in the future, help them out so they don't have to trace every person and try to figure out they're related. Co-worker is a good one because they can skip over you. But then as they're doing their family research and want to get that narrative of that person's life, like I said, fill those details in and they can come back to you and go, what did they do? What did they do at John Deere's from where I've worked? What did they do there? How were they as a coworker? Can you tell me more about your friend? So it gives you those little details that helps you fill out that story. So I suggest you start adding a little descriptor after your name to help a future genealogist. And now let's get onto the next slide, where we're going to actually look at a record. And this is an 1898 birth certificate registered. And what we're doing here is, I just want to point out that just because someone they were the informant or gave the information, everything's not true or as accurate as you might think. Because a lot of times we're assuming, and assuming isn't good, or guessing. So we want to actually back up the information with other documents. And it doesn't have to be a certain number of documents. It can be 10 that you might need to verify this is the information you're seeing, the proof. Because you can't get, and that might be evidence, because you can't be exact. So you have to use several sources to back it up. And sometimes as you're doing research, it might be the absence of records proves what your point. Like, someone's supposed to be in this time and place, say you're thinking they died, and you can't find a death certificate. But all the other records around them is showing that person has died. There's a will, say. Well, just because there's no death certificate, but there's a will, it gives you a time frame of when someone died. Or if you're trying to see a time frame when someone moved, if all the records disappear in the first location around a certain time and reappear in a new location, you know, when the records, when they stop appearing in location A in the records and they reappear in location B, you know that narrows your field of when they move from one location to the next. They might have had a stop in between, but at least it's a shorter distance than 30, 50 years. It might be down to 10 to 5 years. So think about the absence of records that also help you learn. But let me get back on track. On this birth register, we're looking for the informant. In this case, we're going to be following the parents because it's key about the names. The mother and father's name is Sarah Ellen McCulley and James Wilson Wesley. We're assuming the parents were the ones that gave the information about who they were on this birth register. But it's not always the fact. I have one where the grandmother was the informant on who the parents were and the name of the child on the birth record. So it's only as good as the person who gave the information. So let's move on to another example. The same person we're going to be following through on the next record. It's Myrtle. And this is her 1942 delayed birth certificate. And her parents are named Sarah A. Kinney and James Wesley. Well, before it was Sarah Ellen McCulley. So the name's already changed. And the affidavit is given by a Myrtle Johnson. Well, who's Myrtle Johnson? Because I've done the research, I know Myrtle Johnson is the married name of Myrtle Wesley. So she's already, from her birth register to her delayed birth certificate, her parents' name has changed in that one record. But it's over time, 1898 to 1942. So let's look at her brother's marriage certificate. And here it shows his mother's name is Sarah McKinney, and the father's name is James Wesley. We have a third maiden name for this Sarah. What do you know? But who's given the information? The affidavit's given by a Mrs. Walter Ferguson, who was the mother of the bride. Was Lonnie Wesley, who's the groom, is he the one giving the mother-in-law the information, or did he tell her that and then she's later filling out the information and misheard him? We don't know, but it's something to go off of. I want to point out here where it says occupation, color. And I said, don't worry about the spelling as much because not everyone, spelling wasn't consistent. Well, we really have the word color spelled out for you. And the person wrote colored because that's the way they hear it. So even with they instead of just writing black and white or colored again, they rewrote it a different way. That's what I mean about the spelling and go phonetic sometimes you have to look at. And we'll look at a couple more records on this same Myrtle or same family. Now we're going to look at Sarah's death certificate. It's Sarah Wesley. Hey, she has a different last name, but she should because she's married, and this is her married last name. Her parents are William and Annie Kinney, and the informant here is her husband, James Wesley. Well, you got to think, I should say, on a death certificate, the only records that are it's primary or original information is the day of the person's death and the doctor's signature, because everything else is secondhand. James is providing her birth date, her age, her name. If she went by a middle name and he never knew that her first name was something else, he's giving the wrong name. So that's why I say it's secondhand. In this case, the father's name is William Kinney, the mother's name's Annie Kinney. We saw Kinney earlier, so that kind of is consistent with what we saw earlier. But the catch on this one is, did James ever meet the parents, or is he getting this off of memory? Because I've seen other records where both parents' first names are different. So you have to find that evidence that's the correct, because we don't know what James knew. And then we'll look at our last record, and this evidence is only as good as the informant section, is James's death certificate. The informant is a William Wesley, but the catch is James's name changes from James Wilson to James Edmund. Where did Edmund come in? I don't know. I've never been able to prove this. I have been able to figure out it is the same person, but I'm still trying to figure out why this name changed. And it turns out William Wesley, it does it. Some of the death certificates actually tell you the relationship on the informant. This one doesn't, but I know it's James's son. And here we know William doesn't know much about his father's parents because the mother is all unknown, and all he has for the father is the last name is Wesley. And I'm assuming or guessing that he said Wesley is the father's last name because that's his father's last name. But James was born during slavery time. So that last name could actually be his mother's last name and not his father's last name. So think about that too as you're doing research, especially if you're doing color research. I believe it's Hispanics that the last name follows the wife, not the father. So think about when you're doing different nationalities and how their naming patterns work. Just because we do it our way in the US doesn't mean other countries do it the exact same way. And I'm going to show you all the evidence of these last names in one slide. Here's Sarah. We have 4 last names for Sarah. We can discount the last one because we know that she's married. But we went from Sarah Ellen McCulley to Sarah A to Sarah McKinney. All different names for the same person. So what we're going to do as we're doing research, we're going to have to research on all of those names. And I also would suggest doing phonetic sounding names, or if your name is commonly misspelled, look for it that way, because if it's commonly misspelled that way today, it probably was commonly misspelled the same way a while ago. So you look, I have a problem with King, K-I-N-G. I spell it and people still get it K-E-A-N, King. But it's what they hear, so spelling can be different. It's what people read, so they can misspell it as they're transcribing it, because they can't read the handwriting well. So look at that. And in James's case, we see his middle name is Wilson, so that W stays the same. So James is 4 records, he's the same, and then that last record, his name changed. So information isn't consistent. So think about outside the box when you're researching people. And now we're going to look at, let me make sure I didn't miss anything here. Yeah, I told you about computer searches. Sorry, I thought I was going to miss something. So let's look at an obituary. And these are not what we commonly know as obituaries today. This is what obituaries were like in, say, 1930 when James died. It was as much as, this is James, our father that we've been following, James Wesley, who has been sick for about 2 weeks, departed this life Saturday afternoon. So this is all I'm going to find or may find on James, that he died. It doesn't give us his date or anything. So how do we find out when James died? If he died on, this is a Tuesday paper, and he died on Saturday, go back to the previous Saturday, and that's the date he died. So that's how we're going to get it. Quick note, I just thought about this. This JAS is abbreviation for James. When you're searching for him, I would want to use this abbreviation as well. And Charles, you see abbreviated a lot as CHAS. Use those abbreviations when you're searching too. So that was a side note, sorry. So in this is the only obituary that we're going to find of James. It doesn't say obituary. So how do we find it? We're reading the whole newspaper. We're reading the columns about the town where he lived at, and it's going to be mixed in with just so-and-so came to visit, so-and-so moved. It's going to be mixed in with those kind of stories. So you're going to have to read the whole paper and find it that way. Another type of card of thanks is what we would call an obituary. And what you find is they don't always have the person's name. It might just say our loved one died and then the family. But this is where the absence of information comes in. If you know Lori died in 1918 around this time period, and all you can find is this card of thanks saying someone died. If no one else died in your family around that time period, most likely this is her card of thanks for her death. We can't say definitely it's hers, but we can say the possibility that it's her. So that's cool. But in this case, we're lucky because the deceased is actually mentioned in here, Henry Berkeley. And then it mentions the funeral home. It mentions his brother, his son, and his nephew. And I like this one because it has so much detail. And usually you don't get this much detail. So we know Henry died, but again, we don't have a date, but we know the time frame of when this story came out. It was a weekly paper. He died within that week. And you want to look for when someone dies, you look a week before and a week after, especially if it's a weekly paper. I always go a week before and a week after, because it might mention that they were still ill or something too before they died. But in this case, we got Henry's name, we've got his brother, same last name, but his son has a different last name. Could this possibly be a stepson? Well, you know, the name Fike here, it's a nephew. And his brother is Berkeley. Hey, could this be a stepson? Or is this his sister's married last name? We've got maybe a possible married name for a sister, something to work off of. And you know, as I'm thinking, I'm realizing I didn't mention on the funeral program, I mentioned the mother. It could be the mother-in-law. Let me go back here so I can show you. I am so sorry. It just hit me. I didn't tell you this. But when I had the mother, Aldine is the mother. She is actually not the mother. She is the mother-in-law of the deceased. And that's why I was saying you want to check the records and verify your information. But sorry, that just popped in my head that I totally forgot to tell you that. I pulled that out for that reason. Okay, let's get back on track with the obituaries. This is the obituary that we're more commonly used, that would be in the newspaper, but we're going to use it from a funeral program. And this is Myrtle, our the lady who saw the birth register in 1898. We've taken it from birth to death. Now let's get a closer look at this. And it gives birth, obituaries gives you the person's full name. So it's key. If you don't have someone's middle name, you might find it only on a birth certificate or death, sorry. You might only find it in an obituary funeral program. And sometimes they're called memorial programs. And I like this because we have a nice picture of her. And it might be a later in life picture, an earlier life picture, but at least it's a picture. We have her birth and death date if we didn't already have that. We have a church. Now, is this a church she got married at? Church he's baptized at? It's given as a clue to where other records can be found. And this is why I like this funeral program. There's several reasons, but this is first reason why I like it, is because it tells you where she's buried at. It gives you the address, so you don't have to look that up and try to find it. Second, why I like it, is because it tells you exactly where she's buried. So we can go to the Glendale Cemetery, go to Block 49, and find her headstone. And once we get there, we're not just going to take a picture of her headstone and walk away. We're going to look at all the headstones around where she's buried, because most likely there's going to be more family around there. People bury family next to family. And I know there are segregated cemeteries in the past, but don't get a hang up on that, because we bury ourselves next to each other. We are segregating the cemetery that may never actually have been segregated to begin with. We've made it segregated because Glendale actually has a Jewish section. It's owned by the Jewish synagogues, but it's a Jewish section. They segregated themselves. So don't get hung up on that type of stuff. And plus, if you're a minority group, it actually works for your benefit because you're going to know all your people are together. Glendale also has a Tidom section. Well, that community actually requested that section because they have different burial traditions, kind of like the Jewish that they do. They want to have their people together. So that's why I said, don't get hung up on the negatives or what we consider a negative in the past. It's in the past. We've learned from it. We've tried to improve. But again, we still bury ourselves around our own family. So there's going to be family close by. So if you recognize family names, take pictures of those headstones so you don't have to make another trip back. When you come up, as you do your research, you come up with those names again. When I do that, I have a folder that says Glendale and headstones, and I have headstones people I think might be related there. So when I get to that, I can go there and say, oh yeah, there it is. I have their headstone, and I move them into where they should be in our family information. Okay, so let's look at the inside of this obituary. This is my absolute favorite part of the obituary, or the funeral program and obituary, is because it gives you so much family history in this section. It gives you here Sarah's parents' names. But look, we have another name, Sarah A. Kinsey. We have another name to add to our research, because again, it's secondhand knowledge, it's not firsthand. But a lot of the funeral programs, obituaries, in this case, it gives the husband's name, when they were married. So let's go get that marriage record. We're going to find another generation there. It tells you her children's names. So we have that, It gives us a daughter, Johnson Castile. That hyphen we all know means she's married. Let's go find her marriage records. The first place I would look is in Des Moines, because that's where the family lives at. Preceded in death and leaves to mourn. That's what you're looking for on a funeral program. an obituary. That's what you want, because it tells you the family history, right? That section gives you your family history and your stories and where to go next. It says, we'll say here, daughter Kaylin Sullivan Tutree of New Zealand. Well, we need to get a passport. She lives in New Zealand. They have another daughter. That's strange, because it already said earlier in the program, it said they only had 2 children. Well, in this case, I can tell you they raised Kaylin as a daughter because her mother, Lacey May, was killed. And so they raised her as a daughter. That's why she's considered a daughter. But it says here 3 grandchildren. We've got their names and where they live at. Oh, that's a gold mine. We've got nieces and nephews. If a brother is on here, it'll tell you a brother, what their name is, where they're living at. If it's say this was, let's say this was a male's funeral program and it says his sister, it says, we'll just say, what can we say? We'll say Miss Johnson. We'll say the deceased was William Wesley and his sister, Kathy Johnson. It survives him. We've got his sister's married name. And women, we lose their married name, we lose women as they marry because they change their last names. Obituaries, funeral programs give you that name back if they're listed there. So that helps you move another generation. But it also tells you, if I'm looking for Kathy Johnson and I can't find her, but I see that she's alive in Chicago, Ohio, it tells me where to look for her. But if it says that she was preceded in death by Kathy Johnson, well, the reason we can't find her is because she's already died. So we know she died before, I don't remember what year this was. Say she died 1988. We know that Kathy Johnson died before 1988 because she's already dead on this obituary. So we can stop looking for her past 1988. We'll go forward, go the other direction. So that's different things you can find in the funeral program. And let's look at the back of the funeral program, just as important. All sections of it is. This might not actually be on the back. Sometimes they're at the bottom. Even the poems are important because it tells you, unless it's a generic poem that everyone uses, then it can tell you what someone's favorite hymn was. You can add to their story. This is their favorite hymn that they always liked. And they'll usually tell you in the program, this is so-and-so's favorite hymn. But the reason the back is important is because it's a funeral home. In this case, the person died out of state, or could have been just out of town. But we want to contact both funeral home companies because we want to get their records. And why do you want to contact them both? Is because the funeral home, the person who gave the information to the funeral home in Chicago may not be the same person who gave the information in Des Moines. Or even if it is the same person, information may be left out, information may have been added. It may be exactly the same. But we want that information because you never know what's in there that's going to help you. And remember, funeral homes are privately held companies, so they do not have to give you any information. Just be polite, ask them. They don't want to give it to you, check back in a year or 2 or 6 months. Maybe you'll get someone different and they'll be more willing to give you the information. But when you contact them, even if I don't have the funeral program, I don't know exactly when someone died, but I know my family always uses this funeral home, call them. But have it narrowed down to within hopefully a year, 2-year time span. If you can narrow it down even further, give them those details so they can get the information quickly and get it back to you. Because they are a business, they're working, they're not there to serve you, they're there to serve their clients that are coming in. So be as helpful as possible. I know a funeral home record, you're thinking they don't have a lot of information, but I had a relative, Hattie Williams. I could not find her husband's name, and that was her second marriage. The only time I found the husband's name was on the funeral home record. It mentioned his name, but it also mentioned her kids. So I was able to tie that record to my family member. No, I'm looking at the right person. But once I had his first name, I opened up a lot more records. So you never know what's on those funeral home records that might help you out. So you want to get that. You also, if the funeral home's gone out of business, like Fowler and Sons, which is on the previous record, their records are at the State Historical Society in Iowa. So you want to look there. Like I said, it's a privately held company like Estes. Mrs. Estes still holds the records. But this company was sold 2 more times after the family sold it the first time. The second owner has his records, and then when he sold it to the third owner, those records went to the third owner, and now they are closed. So how do I find the information where those records are? Well, contact a funeral home within the location and see if they know who has the records, if you can't find them. Because like I said, it might pass on when they sell it, it could pass on to the next funeral home owner, may or may not. It could be when Mrs. Estes, they sold it, but they kept their records and never passed them on. It was the second and third owner of the records that went forward. So you never know. So I call funeral homes and suggest. If you're calling to the South and you're Black, I didn't know this until I actually had to do this, and they told me. The nice person on the phone was like, "Are you looking for a Black or white person that's deceased?" And I said Black, and he goes, he explained to me, I'm not trying to be offensive or anything, but I'm asking because down here we still don't mix at funeral homes. He says, so Black or white? And I said Black. He goes, okay, let me give you the names of the funeral homes you should be calling, because the other ones are not going to be able to help you. And he goes, and start with this funeral home because they receive more of the Black business. That little information that guy gave me, the first one he told me to call happened to be the right one. It saved me a tremendous amount of time. So ask those questions. I would never have thought to ask that because I'm from Iowa and I've always lived in Iowa. So I didn't realize how segregated the funeral homes are down there. I assumed they were just like ours here. But so don't be offended if someone asks you a question that, especially if you're overseas or something. I'm just trying to help you with things that I've learned over time. Sorry if I'm kind of off track. Here's a newspaper story. And newspapers are good. Like I said, it tells you about if the person ran at Drake Relays. And you want to add that in. But in this case, this is why you want to read the whole section of the newspaper, not just what you're looking for. I was looking for the death of Malcolm Wesley. I found it and then left. I didn't read anything else on this page, this column. This is where my family is from, is Centerville. When I came back years later, if I had read the whole thing, I would have these 4 arrows with all my family, and there's more information about my family within this column. I'm just pointing out 4 key ones of the different family relationships that I would have had if I had just read the whole column. So make sure you're reading the whole paper, the whole column, and don't just read, okay, you don't have time to read the whole paper. Read the news stories about the towns, because that's really important. But if you're fine, this is my second or third cousin, Mrs. Williams. And it tells you she's called to Buxton, Iowa. Oh, no, it's the wrong one. It says Mrs. Jackson of Omaha, Nebraska, who has been visiting Des Moines. Well, she's in Centerville papers, visiting there. She's been to Des Moines. So what do I want to do? I want to go to a Des Moines local paper or the Des Moines section. This is the Iowa Bystander, by the way. Go to the Des Moines section and read the story about is Mrs. William Jackson being mentioned that she visited there, and what information are they saying? Go to the Omaha section, read about Omaha, and see if she departed to go visit her friends or what's going on. And then when she comes back, it might not all be in the same issue, but it's going to be similar. Usually people visit about a week. They went to visit family because it was a little bit distance travel. It was about a week's time. So read the whole paper and look at it. As you're searching, if you see AL, it could be a male or a female. In this case, it happens to be a female. But for Mrs., sometimes you want to look for Mrs. AL. Or if it's the guy, just AL. So don't discount using initials when you're searching, but even on Ancestry or Family Search, because they're recording on how the record looks. Don't use middle initials. If I know it's America Louise Crittenden, I don't want to use America Louise Crittenden when I'm searching, because most people don't use their middle names in records. So you're not going to find her because you're looking for that whole name. Just use the first one. Use nicknames. If the first name is Elizabeth, use Liz or Lizzie, because that could be what the record's under. So another clue. Okay, this is what you guys have been waiting for. If you don't have very little information, how do you find someone? Well, this is what I did. You want to set a research question, which this is Helen Lux. And when I began, like I told you, I just picked the Waukee yearbook. I happened to pick 1921. And so she is a sophomore, so I'm estimating she's 15 to 16 years old. So then I figured out that makes her born about 1904 and 1905. So we have a little information already on her. She's a sophomore at Waukee. She's 15, 16 years old, and she was born in 1904 and 1905. So I set this research question of who did she marry? That's simple. And you set a research question so you don't go down a rabbit hole and totally get sidetracked. And then you never get to the research of the person you're trying to research. And I'll show you an example of what I mean by a rabbit hole or a shiny object. But as we look for Helen, what I do next is I look for her in the census closest to what year this is, which is 1921. So the federal census was taken in 1920. So that's what we did. Here's the whole census page. This section here is her family. But since you can't see it, I actually increased it for you. And here is Helen with the arrow. And this is what I was saying about names could be a little different. Sometimes you might actually have to look through the whole page or page by page to find someone. In this case, this could have been mistaken as a Nelson or an N instead of an H. So that's why I said signatures are a little off. We have her siblings. There's Walter, Paul, Orville. That's all of her siblings. Her parents are George and Lizzie. That's where I got the Elizabeth. Instead of Elizabeth, you have Lizzie. You want to look for her. And our Helen is 15 years old. So we had her 1921, 15, 16 years old. We're right on track. So we know we have the right person here. And then, so what I would do next is look for her in the next census year, which is 1930. Remember, she's Helen Lux is what we have. And we do find a Helen in 1930 in the same Dallas County, except our Helen is only 8 years old. And she has a middle name, Helen L. And she's a stepdaughter of Walter Lux. So she's a stepdaughter. Lux most likely isn't her last name, but we did find a Helen. So we know this isn't the right Helen. She doesn't have the right parents. She's not the right age. If you can see the rest of the census page, you see that she was born in California, not Iowa, where our Helen's born. But this Walter could be our Helen's brother because he matches the time frame age. So at least we've got the family. So we'll just this week, that's not the right person. Let's continue to move on. Since I can't find her in the census between 1920 and 1930, let's look for a marriage record for her. And we do find one in 1928, Helen Mary Lux. And it says, here's her name here. We've got the right one because her parents' names are George and Lizzie Lux. So yay, we got her. So we know she married. She married a William Reinke Jr. So I wasn't able to find her in the census because she's already married. So I'm not going to find her under her maiden name. And then also, she lives in Huntley, Minnesota, not Iowa. So that's another record. So let's go on and wrap up what we found our research question, which was, who did Helen Lux marry? Who did Helen Lux, who graduated from Waukee High School, marry? Well, she married William Reinke in 1928. I found a newspaper clipping where it tells you exactly where she married, at the little brown church in the Vale. And so now that we've answered our research question, what do we want to do now from here? We want to find her in her lifetime, all the census during her lifetime, her birth certificate, her death certificate. We want to fill out her story. We want to use that fan club, that family associates and neighbors to do that. And where do we find those records? We're going to use familysearch.org because it's free. You don't want to pay for ancestry.com because if you pay for it now and you decide you don't really want to get into this much, you're going to be paying for it another year because it's automatic. So start with the free stuff. As you get more into it, then use ancestry.com. And don't pay for it. Use it in your public library. It's free for you there. And that's a service they provide. So I want to show you this record, which says Family Search Affiliate here, because you're going to run into this. It's not the record. Don't pay attention to the people. It's because I want to show you this because of this research affiliate. Family Search sometimes requires you to go to an actual affiliate library. Iowa Genealogical Society is one. So what you do is put your search in the tools. So when you get to the library, you can open those tools up and that image will be there. It's because of the contracts that Family Search has with the states, counties, cities, that they're required to do this. It's still free. You have to go somewhere to get it. Family Search does require you to sign up for a membership, or it's not a membership, but subscribe to it, just give your information. Sometimes during your search, you might have to re-sign in. It's still free, re-sign in. It's just that state or county is tracking how many visitors they're getting. And eventually if they get too many, they'll take it off the family search and put it behind a pay site on their own state. Not always, but that's my feeling of what they do. So when you get a record, immediately download it. Don't just save it out there on your family tree online to Ancestry or your family search tree, because if the record disappears off their site, it's going to disappear out of your tree. So you want to have that original record already saved, because you don't want to have to go back and look at it and now have to pay for it. And I'm sorry, I've lost track of my time, so I'm sorry if I'm going over. 1925 is a good census for Iowa because it's 3 pages. It actually asks you who are the parents of the person they're enumerating. And everyone wants to be in Iowa in 1925. So I'll give you an example. Here's the people that they're enumerating on the first page. Here's the second page. It asks for the father's name. It asks for the mother's name. Yay, we've got a generation there, the second generation. But the cool thing is this: if there's a number next to this person, look for that person, and hopefully they're in Iowa too, because they are. Now you have a third generation because their parents are going to be listed. And it asks for the wife's maiden name. So you're going to get a maiden name and be able to go back a generation on her side. The sad thing is, if there's no number, that person is deceased. So you're not going to get that generation back. But at least you know they died before 1925. This second column here asks where the person was born, gives you the state. This enumerator, only time I've ever seen it, asks for some reason, even in the middle of he's doing all this, he gave the cities where these people were from. I hadn't seen that before, so I want to point that out. The third page isn't relevant to what we're talking about, so I'm not just showing you that. This is where I'm talking about the rabbit hole, where you want to have a research question. When I was doing this for a Black history presentation, and I did the same thing, I went and found a yearbook, looked for someone. I was looking for a Black person. I couldn't tell if the lady was Black or not all the way. So I pulled up a census just to verify if she was Black. Yes, she was. But then I got sidetracked. I saw her brother's name, Archie Alexander. It sounded familiar. So I Googled it. And then I was down a rabbit hole and I lost my whole day. And I didn't research this lady at all because I thought it's just ridiculous. But I found her brother on a Wikipedia page. Look him up. Very interesting guy. But this is how, when you come across something, you're like, oh, that's interesting. Don't research it. Write that down to come back to. In fact, write on a section, I need to come back and research this. It's a column title. And I would write research Archie Alexander, and then why. A little note on why I want to research that person. And then continue on with your research. Because if you don't do that, you're going to be researching Archie Alexander. That has nothing to do with what you're trying to do. And you lost a whole day of research. And you don't want to do that. So now you've got all this information. What do you do with it? I like paper because paper gives you, it makes you actually take the time to read the document you're looking at. You can't focus in on that one person. So you're looking at everything. So this is why I do paper research. And then I put it on computer, but I like paper. This where it says ancestors, that would be you. It could be in the middle. It could be out here. Then your father. The males are always on the top, like here. The women are always on the bottom. It'll be your father, your mother, grandfather, grandmother, and then your mother's father and her mother down here. So that's just visual. It doesn't really tell you much. So this is my favorite one I like, is the family group sheet, where it has the husband, the wife. Let me zoom in on here. Husband, the wife, and then the children. If you're the husband, then this is gonna be your wife, your children. If you're the child, this is gonna be your parents. But you got the whole family setting together in one. Quickly you can see them. And this goes down, I think, 10 children. So it's a lot more. Let's quick view of it. Oh, I always forget to tell you this. Don't worry about these programs, these forms I'm showing you next. If you email me and put down Waukee in the subject or somewhere in the message, then I'll send you these forms for free. I've already gathered, they're all free online, but I've gathered them together for you to save you the time of having to go gather them yourself. And I'm asking you to put Waukee in there because I have a little bit of this presentation set aside for Waukee so that you can, it's tailored to Waukee, so I can give you that information. And then the next form here is the census information. It's just in there so that you know 1850 what they were asking for. And it tells you from 1790 to 1940 what was asked on the census. 1940 is the most recent one out. That's why it stops at 1940. The 1950 census comes out next year in April. So look forward to that. And then this is one thing you need to do. As I said, you want to get the census of everyone in their lifetime, and this helps track it. So if someone was born in, say, this is me, I was born in 1847. I'm going to mark these ones before 1847 off because I'm not born yet, so I don't need to look for them. If I died in 1895, I'm going to mark the census years off after that because I don't need them. So what I'm going to do is, I was born in 1847. If I was born before the census was taken, I'm going to be on there. If I was born after the census was taken, I'm not going to be on there. So just because you can't find someone born in a census year doesn't mean their birth year is wrong. It just means they could have been born after the census was taken. That's all that means. And then some states have state census as well as the federal census. You want to get the state census because it does give you a little information to help place them in time and place. And you do the same thing with the federal census, mark off which ones you received and which one you need. And then where can you find this information? Well, you can find the newspapers at ancestryhunt.com. They have national newspapers and links to national newspapers. The State Historical Society of Iowa, they have microfilm of newspapers in Iowa. And some are the National Archive, or Chronicling America has some of our Iowa newspapers as well, and national newspapers. But I want to show you this because Waukee was a coal mining town, or surrounded by coal mining towns. And the State Historical Society, which is currently closed because of COVID, has mining fatality accident index. So if you have a coal miner in your family that was died or injured, it's going to tell you here. It's going to tell you how they died or how they were injured in this index. If you have a coal miner that you don't know was injured or died, look at this anyhow, because it's going to tell you that. If you know what town they were in, you can look at all the coal mines for that town. If you know the coal mining town name, coal mine name, you can find it that way. So it's a great resource to look at. FamilySearch.org is what I said. Do you want to sign up for that free membership? Use it for free. Don't pay. Because why put money out? Because your library has access to Ancestry for free for you. And I'll talk about your library resources on the next slide. Iowa Genealogical Society, where you can go to get that family search library information, is a paid membership location. You can pay yearly or you can pay a daily fee, but check with them. I'm not for sure if they charge you to go look at family search records on their website, at their premises. Google your name. Just put it in Ricki King in parentheses, Google it. Just because your person died in 1870 doesn't mean they're not going to be in the news today, because people are always adding more information out there, writing blogs, doing papers, books. You never know who might have written recently about your family and you're missing it because you didn't take the time to Google it, and it'll save you a lot of research time. Now let's look at your own library resources at the Waukee Library. I went out there. I took this picture from offline, but I forgot to take it when I was out there. But I was there, and I love your guys' sculpture. I just had to point that out. I love this here. But anyhow, your library has Ancestry.com for free. All you need is a library card. You have to be in the library to use it as well. But Ancestry also owns Heritage Quest, which you can use at home with your library card. I have not been able to figure out what the difference is. I know there's a difference between what records you can get at home for Ancestry, but hey, it's still something you can use along with your family search. I use both of them when I research, because Ancestry has some records, family search has others. They have overlapping, but not everything's overlapping. Newspaper archives, do that newspaper research. Hey, your library is offering it to you for free. It's a paid site, but you can get it for free at your library. Use it. Go to your library. This is where I was talking about. Barnett was the library. I'm sorry, I said Burnett, I think. But Sylvia Barnett, she's the one that did the Civil War record scrapbook for her son, Carl D. Barnett, who was a POW. Great resource. I was at your library. I don't have any family in Dallas County. I enjoyed those. I looked at every one of those scrapbooks. I enjoyed what information she gathered. I'm so glad that she did it, because she's saving you time to have to do some of that newspaper research. She can get you right there. Use it. Go look at it. Just to go enjoy it. The Waukee yearbooks are there. They're only missing 2001, 2016, and 2017. So hey, if you have it, donate it. It's a good resource, those yearbooks. They also have 1921 to 1931, so we're missing some years in there. If you have someone that's passed away and they have the yearbook, donate it to your library. Help let other people use it. But they have the whole run, except for those missing years from 1948 to 2018. Just go look at the different fashion changes. Who knows? But this is what Des Moines Central Library can help you with. They have, since the State Historical Society library is closed, you don't have access to their microfilm. The Central Library has Des Moines Register and Tribune and Iowa Bystander on microfilm there. You can use it, their library, for free. You can do a newspaper obituary search online that can help you get quicker to what newspaper date and column you need to save you some time there. It's under the search on their library. I love libraries. I'm always pushing libraries. So what do you do when you go to the library? You read a book. Yes, these are some books I recommend that you use to help further your research. Black Roots. It's only called Black Roots because the author is Black and he's doing Black Roots. But it doesn't matter because the beginning genealogy, the beginning's the same for no matter what nationality you are. It starts to change when you're going overseas or when you get to 1870, where Blacks have to start doing a little bit different research. But it's all the same at the beginning. It helps you get organized. It helps you, tells you how to cite those sources where I was saying you want to be able to go back and find them. Great resource. It's the one that got me started, and I still recommend it today. The second one is Find Your Tree. If you're doing that overseas research or a little more advanced, it'll tell you where to go to. I used this book last year, to 2020, to help me do some research in Bahamas. I had never done it. It told me where to go to, what records to look at in Bahamas. Another great resource. This is, if you're wanting to learn more about family search and ancestry, it gives you some tips, behind the scenes tips on those. Great resources. Your library recently is acquired or in the process of requiring Research Like a Pro, a genealogist guide. It's another resource along with this Black Roots that tells you how to research. But it's telling you how to research like me, so you're not such a hobbyist and you might have to go back and redo something because you're at the beginning and you didn't know you should do it. That's a great resource to help you not have to go back and repeat information. So use that, read it. It's a new one. If you're interested in DNA, it's called The Family Tree Guide to DNA Testing and Genetic Genealogy by Blaine Bettinger. But all you have to do is Google genealogy. Not Google, but search genealogy, search DNA. You'll find these books and others at your library that's going to help you further your research. I'm a big believer in reading and learning that way. So now what do you do? And I'm sorry, as I said, if you email me, I will email you that information on those books. It'll have the forms to send to you. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I just trying to save you time and having to look for this information I've already gathered for you. So I want to leave you with some information. When I started at the very beginning, I will leave you with a comment from the beginning. Sorry. Everyone was a beginner, even experienced researchers. Oral history can change a little over time, but it does contain nuggets of truth. Be flexible in the spelling of names and the ages of family. Look at the fan club on records, which are the friends, associates, and neighbors. Write down where information is found so you can find it again if needed. That's where that Research Like a Pro book will help you. Last, but just as important, everything is not on the internet and everything on the internet is not true. You'll have to visit a courthouse or a library to truly find your family. I challenge you today to go look at a funeral program, look at a scrapbook, and start digging into your family history. If you have questions, please email me. Use in the title, the subject, or the text that you're from the Waukee library presentation, so I can make sure I get you the right information, and I'll get those answers back to you on those questions. Thank you for attending today, and I enjoy hearing from you.